All right, welcome to another episode of The Fundable Founder. I'm here with Sam Russo today from Dive Technologies. I like the hat.
Thanks, Charlie. We'll have to get you one.
Yeah, no, it's great advertising. But really glad to have you on here today. I think what you're doing is really interesting, and you're solving some good problems out there that are not easy to solve. So why don't you start? What is Dive Technologies? What's your elevator pitch?
Sure. Yeah, so Dive Technologies is a designer and manufacturer of large and extra large autonomous underwater vehicles, which I'll probably call an AUV as we kind of talk through things today.
Yep.
And what this is, Charlie, is really think like an aerial drone, but for the ocean. And a lot of what was kind of behind this for our team, and as we sort of think about the big picture, somewhere around 75% of planet Earth is covered by water. And if we think about the oceans, I mean, they're a very harsh environment. And because of this, they're really largely unexplored today. And as a team, we think this is really kind of the last frontier that needs to become more accessible to defense, commercial, and research customers. And the technology that we're bringing to bear through Dive Technologies, if we do this right, we should be able to pave a path that helps to really fully proliferate that market, make the oceans more accessible, help those researchers, and really unlock this last frontier.
That's great. And you mentioned you focus on large and extra large underwater vehicles. Why is that? What's the problem there, and why is that the area you decide to focus on?
Yeah, so I guess what I would say here is that when I think about the market as it exists today and kind of Dive coming into the market, we're really kind of standing on the shoulders of giants here, so to speak. And so there's companies like Hydroid out on the Cape that was recently acquired by Huntington Ingalls.
Yep.
They spun out of Woods Hole in the 90s. Companies like Bluefin Robotics that spun out of MIT also in the 90s, which is where myself and my two co-founders came from. And these are companies that are very good at making those first generation robots that do very meaningful things in the ocean. But they're also somewhat single purpose built. And this is largely because they've kind of confined themselves to a smaller form factor. And as we put our heads together, we kind of thought that by going bigger, although it sounds maybe counterintuitive, you could do things like drive down cost in these robots, but also increase capability. So just by going larger, you can pack more energy into the vehicle, and you can also kind of create this flexibility in the ability to kind of configure differently, bring different sensors to bear, and use them to collect ocean data for different customers. And so for us, it was really, let's go bigger. Let's make a vehicle that can be launched from the pier, go out, do interesting things in the ocean and return to the pier. So get away from the model where you have to take a manned surface vessel out to sea, deploy the vehicle, recover it, come back to port and analyze your data. We want to be able to do all of this right on the robot over the course of, say, days or weeks at a time in the ocean. So again, we went larger to be able to accomplish that. And the first vehicle that we created, which we put in the ocean last year, is 4 feet in diameter and 20 feet long. And we kind of see this as sort of maybe the smaller end of the spectrum and what we'll create, but we made this vehicle with an eye towards being able to scale. So we can easily take this architecture, make it much larger, and get offshore for, say, a different customer with different mission needs rather quickly. So a very scalable architecture is kind of what we focused on also.
That makes sense. So you mentioned that you and your co-founders all came out of Bluefin. Did you start collaborating on this idea for Dive Technologies while you were still there, or did you kind of all come back together at some point and say, hey, we think there's still this hole in the market, this gap in the market, and let's go fill it?
Yeah, I would say, Charlie, it's pretty clear that Bluefin, similar to Hydroid, they kind of have their family of AUVs that they offer. And so for us, it was just at a very high level, we felt like we wanted to do something much larger. And we kind of thought that we'd have to go out on our own in order to do that. We just kind of felt that innovating would take sort of like walking away, starting from scratch, and it would take doing our own startup at Dive to kind of pull this off. So that's what we did.
So when did you decide to do that? When did you stand up Dive as your startup?
Yeah, so we launched this company in August of 2018. So I guess we've been at it for about 2.5 years now.
Yeah. Good. And so let's talk a little bit about your fundraising strategy and your strategy for
Sure.
getting your business off the ground. So, obviously you're in a pretty complex market. You're talking about building large and extra large underwater vehicles. So already I'm thinking that probably requires a little bit of capital. And probably takes a little
not
bit
inexpensive.
Yeah, a little bit of capital, more capital than a B2B software company might require to get off the ground. So, how did you think about, how when to approach VCs and which VCs to approach,
Sure.
and how did you go about that?
Yeah, so I'll try to break this down in the way that we approach the problem anyway. I'd say that we kind of started with the business plan or the business model. So kind of, on day one of launching Dive, you're at ground zero, but you know where you want to get someday. You want to grow into a big company, hopefully have a successful exit. So how are we going to get there? And I'd say that we made a lot of assumptions, everything from, say, like what would the initial platform offering look like? How much might that cost us? How many customers are going to get on board with this? What do those sales look like? And then we tried to parse this out to, I guess, correlate with different fundraising rounds. So we tried to think about it in terms of milestones.
Yeah.
So when we first launched the company, although we had this grand vision, we kind of needed to stick with the basics, which I would describe as figure out what the initial design and concept look like, and go out and talk with customers very early to make sure that what we were conceptualizing is something that they would want to buy.
Right.
And so when we started the company, we raised $1 million on a convertible note to do just that. We worked on early concept design and validating our assumptions about the market. As we worked through, I guess, the better part of a year, and we felt like we were kind of seeing the indicators that we wanted from the market and our design was going in a good direction, we then went out and fundraised on our next set of milestones, which I would say was finalizing the design, building the product, and testing the product. And so we raised $3 million to do what I just described there. We closed on that financing in early 2020. We built out the vehicle by midsummer of 2020, kind of working through the pandemic, which had some interesting personnel and supply chain challenges. But nonetheless, we got the vehicle built. And by August of 2020, we were offshore with the vehicle for our initial seed trials. So this all went really well for us. We were really happy with the performance of the vehicle. We felt, again, like, we're kind of onto something with the initial product offering, and we had this eye towards being able to scale the vehicle. So the next set of milestones, which is kind of what we're operating off of today, is that we brought in $4 million that we closed on at the end of 2020. This was a seed extension financing. So we kind of piggybacked on the seed financing terms with some slight changes. And what we signed ourselves up for here is, I'd say, early scaling of the company. So we're proving out what we call the robot as a service business model. So taking the vehicle that we built last year, plus another vehicle that we're building today, and using these vehicles in a service role for customers. And also we're using some of this money to help us to deliver on some of the contracts that we've won. DoD is one of the early adopters of our technology. So we needed to be able to have a slight capital infusion in order to bring in the right team members and outfit the facility appropriately to deliver on some of these contracts. And so that's what we're operating on today, and that gives us, I'd say, runway into mid 2022. At that point, I think that we would characterize the next fundraise as a more proper Series A round, and I would call this a true growth round, kind of taking us into a place where we'll have more asset vehicles and moving towards a production facility at that point.
That's great. And so, really mapping out that strategy in advance helped you out with getting the company funded. Had you gone out, 2 years ago, 3 years ago and asked for $8 million, you probably wouldn't have been successful.
Yeah, I think two things. People would have probably turned us away, or if they gave us that money, we probably wouldn't have liked the terms that would have gone with it, right? Like we had a lot to prove, and I think it was really good to sort of parse things out the way that we did and kind of prove this to ourselves, to our investors, and to our customers. It's been, at least for us, it's been kind of a good strategic approach to fundraising.
So that first $1 million you got, I think you said it was in a convertible note. How did you go about that fundraise? Because you were still more, it was still more concept. You guys had experience in the industry, but it was more concept. So how do you go raise money when you're at that stage?
Yeah. So, I mean, frankly, this was like a true friends and family round. Okay. I'd say some of this money was, an extension of friends and family, but these were all people that, I guess, felt compelled to support myself and my two co-founders as people, right? Like, sure, they heard us talk about maybe the product that we were envisioning and the market that we were going after, but I think people were investing in us as a team at that point. We did bring one institutional investor, Milltown Capital, which is a fund out in Western Massachusetts in the Berkshires. They're an impact investment fund and kind of an extension of a family office, but they were a really good early institutional investor that I think gave us very sound advice early in the life cycle of the company. So I would characterize them as being kind of outside of the friends and family dollars and of significant value at the time and still today.
Yeah, that's great. I'm a big fan of the guys over at Milltown. They do great work, and especially for companies that are primarily located in kind of central Western Mass. And that's really important what they do. So then what about the $3 million raise? You can't go back to friends and family and raise another $3 million unless you're come from a family that has billions probably. So how did you think about that fundraise?
Yeah, so this was an interesting one. We talked with a lot of VCs for this seed round. I mean, I would say that maybe we talked with somewhere around 75. We learned a lot through this process. We had to have thick skin. We heard no a ton. To be honest, we wasted probably a good amount of time talking with people that might have been intellectually curious about what we were doing, but maybe weren't ever going to put money into Dive. But it was a good learning process. Now, what I would say is kind of back to the Milltown piece. We got to a point where we weren't having success with finding a lead investor, sort of in like the deep tech or dual use technology, meaning defense and commercial technology application space, which is where we were targeting. And so in talking with Milltown, they then emerged as having initially indicated that they would be an investor in the syndicate, and instead they decided to lead that seed round. And this was huge for us, Charlie. It took some pressure off us to a certain extent. We still needed to fill out the syndicate, but at least we had a term sheet and a deal that we felt strongly about and that we could socialize. So that was kind of a very pivotal point for us, and kind of seeing the light that we would actually pull this $3 million together with the help of Milltown in that lead role and get our vision to come to life. That $3 million was everything to us to actually make this robot. So really credit to their team for kind of stepping up and helping us to pull that together.
It's so important to have good investor partners.
Absolutely. And so I guess, if you don't mind, I would just add that in 2020, we had at one point conceptualized a Series A round that we thought we would pull together around this time in 2021. With the uncertainty of the pandemic, we actually turned to our cap table. So Milltown, Virginia Tech Carillion Innovation Fund, Tanis Ventures, Cav Angels, which is an angel group affiliated with the University of Virginia, and then some of the angel investors outside of those that I just mentioned that were on the cap table. And we kind of explained what we felt we were up against. And we started to kind of see that there was this consensus around if Dive could really deliver on making the vehicle that we had signed ourselves up to make and get in the ocean and test in 2020, there was consensus that we could then pull together that $4 million round internally with the existing investors. So this was huge for us. It was very validating. It felt like, we had kind of proven to our investor base that like we could pull this off, and we had their support to pull together another 4 million, which allowed us to focus, I'd say, on the right things, which was technology development, engaging customers, making sure that we were building out the team with the right people. So yeah, it was immensely helpful to us.
That's great. So what were some of the lessons learned in the fundraising process and words of advice or wisdom you'd like to pass along to aspiring entrepreneurs out there, especially those in kind of the robotics and drones and underwater vehicle space?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, this is going to sound pretty basic, but I think that when I think back to our fundraising success, so it kind of day one, it was myself, my two co-founders. But like I had surrounded myself with good people, and I would hope that they would say the same thing. And then I think about where we are today and what we've been able to pull off in the last year. And again, it's because we've surrounded ourselves with really awesome people. We have incredibly brilliant engineers that are humbling to be around. We've been able to fundraise because they have kind of put their heads together and made this a success. So my advice, I guess, first and foremost, is to just surround yourself with like super awesome, good people that want to wake up every morning and hit home runs because they're passionate about what you've created together. And I think that we've been successful because of that. Now, this doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. Like it was certainly very challenging at times. I mean, I can think back to, so you talk about people, and like on the flip side, what that means is that, you as a founder have signed yourself up to, I guess, providing somebody a paycheck and, for their livelihood, and they might have a spouse and kids at home. And these are all things that you're going to think about as you raise money and watch your, your balance sheet closely.
As you're burning money is when that really gets stressful.
Yeah. So it's super stressful stuff, but I'd say like overall, this whole thing is a roller coaster, but if you have good people around you, at least for us to date, I would say that it's largely the team that has made us successful. So I would just say, like, think long and hard. From the moment that you start the company, who are you starting it with? Are these people that have skill sets that complement one another really well? And as you bring new people on the team, are they people that are going to kind of challenge you technically? Are they people that are going to help you to rise to the next level? These are questions that I think you always want to be asking yourself, even as you fill out the team, looking at existing team members, making sure they're in roles where they can still rise to the occasion and just do great things. So yeah, for me, a lot of it has been about the people, I would say.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's certainly early stage entrepreneurship and investing is all about the people, right? It's, as investors, we look for good teams and the people who run those teams. As entrepreneurs, you're looking for investors who can provide more than just money. They provide a lot of value. They're there with you in the good times and the bad. And then you're looking for people on your team who also complement all of, the founders and kind of provide that extra effort. And so we're all we're in a people business, right? It's, and everyone
I
thinks
wouldn't have
about,
thought that, but it sure feels
you're
that
investing
way.
in early stage technology. It's not really accurate. We invest in early stage entrepreneurs.
Right.
And in turn,
Yeah.
we expect you to go invest in early stage employees who are going to help grow your business.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. So that's abundantly clear to me now. When we started the company, all we were really fixated on, I think, was kind of the getting to that technical offering.
Yep.
But if you think about how we got to this technical offering, it's 100% credit to the team and the people that we've surrounded ourselves with.
Yeah. And, I mean, do you have any methods or techniques for finding the right people? I mean, what is your process for finding the right people?
Yeah, that's a good question, Charlie. I would say that it's something that we're working to, I'd say, better codify now. We do have the luxury of posting these jobs in the Boston area where
Right.
there is a lot of talent.
There's a lot of talent.
So I think that that's helped us, but we are in kind of a niche sector. So while we do see a lot of applications, there aren't necessarily that many that have the experience that we might need. But that said, I think that for us, it's just as important to evaluate behaviors as it is technical talents. And again, this is something that we're working to codify so that we can sort of make this part of our culture and better define how it is that we select people through our hiring rubric. But it's a work in progress, but we've been pretty fortunate so far.
Well, I'll send you some stuff that I've put together around that too, because it's a bit of a passion for me about,
Awesome.
making sure that people think about hiring the right way, as opposed to hiring just kind of the easy way. And for us, I don't really care about somebody's resume or where they came from. I really care about, their work ethic, their decision-making skills, their intellectual curiosity,
Right.
their passion, their trustworthiness, as well as some other behaviors like, do they like to have fun, or are they, just, nose to the grindstone. And so, how do you evaluate those things is the best way to build a team, in my opinion. So I'll send you
I'd love to see your resources. Thank you. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Great. We are just about out of time here. I think you've provided a lot of great advice. I do like to finish with one question though, and that is, how would you describe yourself in one word?
I feel like I would say that I'm a doer. Okay. I hope other people would agree.
Yeah. And I'll give you a little secret. I ask that question at the end of every one of my interviews when I'm interviewing for our team. So that's another way to just get to the core of who a person is to ask them.
I like it.
To describe themselves in one word. So, well, thank you so much, Sam. Really appreciate you being on the Fundable Founder today and sharing your insights, and good luck with everything at Dive Technologies.
Yeah, you're very welcome, Charlie. Thank you very much for having me.
To innovate, invent, and disrupt, we're your partner to fuel your growth. Contact us to learn more.